Boys, there's a major flaw in the Bitcoin system, and that is people storing their private keys on paper or steel. And so I've been in Bitcoin for a couple of years now. I got in 2020, I believe, and I've spent a lot of nights laying in bed thinking about how protected is my Bitcoin, because it doesn't really matter how much Bitcoin you have today. If you don't have that in 10 or 20 years from now, or your family can't access that if something were to happen to you, you really have no Bitcoin. And so had been looking for this solution for a very long time, and it just kind of stumbled into my life recently. And so I just wanted to share the idea here, the concept behind the 21 sats security and inheritance plan, using super backed, using encryption. And hopefully after explaining it here, you guys have a couple questions which will provide some clarity to other people who might be looking for a better way to secure their Bitcoin. So again, the why here, the problem is a lot of people go through the process of getting their Bitcoin, generating keys from a cold card, a passport, a Jade, very secure offline way to do it. The device itself is very secure. It's encrypted. It requires a PIN to access. But then they leave their 12 or 24 words either laying right beside it or somewhere else in their house. And if somebody were to break into that house and come across their 12 or 24 words, they're just written in plain text, which means there's no security on that. Even though it's a good thing to have as backup in case something happens to your device, that's a security vulnerability or a major flaw in the Bitcoin system today. So that's kind of the idea here, is that we encrypt the 12 or 24 words, plus your PIN code, plus your passphrase, plus really any other information that you want to pass on if something unexpected were to happen to you today or tomorrow or in a week from now. And so that's the idea here. That's the solution that we built. That's something brand new that we're offering here. And so do you guys have any thoughts on this just right off the bat in terms of paper, steel, encryption? Any questions that come up right away?
Yeah, I have a question for you. So, I'm sure the people watching this know that your private key is, let's say, generated by your wallet. So, how does this work? So, does your private key still get generated by the wallet, and then you encrypt it using using
Yes.
a different way? So, how does that work? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So basically, as Rajat said there, when you set up a cold card or something, it generates a private key. And that private key is translated into 12 or 24 words, which you are supposed to write down on paper. Some people hammer it into steel, but that's there in case something happens to your signing device, your cold card, your passport. And so the idea here is that with the software called Superbacked, it's basically a text box. So think it's about that big, and you can put any information you wanted. It's not even specific to Bitcoin. Any information that you would like to pass on to your kids or whoever, if something were to unexpectedly happen to you, you can put in this text box there. And so it's encrypted because when you store it in there, it prints out these different QR codes. And in order to unlock this text box, your secret text box, you need to scan the QR code, and you need to type in your password or your passphrase that you create. And that's the only way that you can access the words in there. So it basically replaces the need for paper or steel or however else people store their recovery phrase. It's hidden within this box. It's encrypted using QR codes, and you need a passphrase that only you know to access that information in there. So that's essentially the encryption aspect of it.
So how do you store those QR codes? Because that QR code, it's not actually is it actually the, say, 12 or 24 words that you've written in that's been encrypted and then put into the information of the QR code? Or is it sort of a key that unlocks that information? And then how do you store that QR code?
Yeah, a bit of both, I guess. But the way you store it is the nice thing about the solution here is that you can actually geographically disperse these. So you could print out these QR codes. You can make multiple copies of them. You could actually set up a multi-sig of QR codes as well. So it acts very similar to like a key would in the sense of a device in a multi-sig. But you can store these wherever you want to. So you could keep one at your house, maybe behind a picture frame. You laminate these QR codes so they're designed to last for 100 years, right? So it's acid-free paper, laminated, and you can kind of store them wherever you want to. So you might keep one at your house. You might keep one with your lawyer, one at your safety security box, one at Rajat's house, one at Forrest's house, one at your cousin's house. And then in order to recover or unlock your secret phrase, which has your recovery phrase in there, you just need to access one or two or three of these, scan it, put in your passphrase, and then all of a sudden your recovery phrase appears, which is nice.
Okay.
Because if you think about the different threats people have, break-ins, fires, having these geographically dispersed is a huge another layer of security on top of your Bitcoin.
What happens if you were to lose those?
Then you're in trouble. But the
Okay.
nice thing is that you can make duplicate copies of them. So, for example, you'd probably have like 5 of the exact same QR codes. You'd leave one in different, one in this city, maybe one in this country. And so you never want to have like one single point of failure there. You want to make duplicates of them.
So
Gotcha.
I want to ask a question about so just following through with what Forrest said. What if you lose one and somebody finds it and then they try to put in the password a bunch of times? How do you protect yourself against something like that? What if they get the password right?
Same thing. You're in trouble. But the idea here is that if somebody just magically came across this, they, even if they scan it, they wouldn't know that it's anything to do with Bitcoin. It would just be a QR code there. So you'd actually need the super backed software to, you know, see that this is a QR code. Then you put in your passphrase. So the key here is you can kind of put these wherever you want to. Obviously, you want to leave them with trusted people in your life, just to eliminate some of the risk there. But the passphrase is something that you would put on steel. The passphrase is something that you would keep in your house. But if you compare that to like your 12 or 24 words, if somebody came across this in your house, it's just a word, right? Versus 12 words, people are going to know that that's Bitcoin. Or 24 words, people are going to know, maybe not today, but in years from now, versus just one passphrase. You get a QR code, you scan it, you put in your passphrase, and all of a sudden you have your Bitcoin again.
Okay, so I have a question here. So say you go just the seed phrase, passphrase wallet style, which is, you write down or you stamp down your 12, 24 words, you keep that in a safe, then you have a passphrase on top of that. That passphrase is your 13th or 25th word. You actually store all your Bitcoin in there. Say you get robbed, somebody finds your seed phrase and there's no Bitcoin on there. It's still protected by this passphrase, which I'm kind of trying to figure out what the difference is with this. I mean, you've encrypted your seed phrase into a QR code, but it's still, what's protecting it is that partially that encryption, but then also having a separate passphrase as well, or password that
Yes.
accesses you to the combination of your QR code and the passphrase. So how is that much different, having the encrypted seed phrase besides just the regular seed phrase and a passphrase?
Right. And that's a very fair question. I do think that people who might have a single sig set up right now with just a cold card and 24 words, I do think that a passphrase is a much preferred option to that. It is kind of the next step from there. It's a great solution. The problem is that a lot of people, they set that up. They think that they have this decoy wallet in their house. But if somebody comes across their 24 words and they have 0 Bitcoin on there, or they have like a million sats, they're going to know that there's Bitcoin hidden somewhere else, right? That they would be able to access either by you giving them the passphrase to it. They're going to find a way to get that Bitcoin from you. So the nice thing about this setup is it actually allows you to geographically disperse them. You don't have to have a trace of Bitcoin in your house if somebody were to break into your house. So that's kind of the idea here, is that the passphrase is great. But even with the decoy, I think people kind of are confused in a way where if somebody's that sophisticated to break into your house to get your Bitcoin, they're not going to be satisfied with a million sats. That they're going to know it's a decoy wallet, right? And so with this, you want to get to the point where even if somebody did break into your house, there's literally nothing that you can do in that part, right? Because under these circumstances, it's going to be very stressful. You're not going to really know. You're going to be all out of sorts. And so you're probably going to give them your passphrase combined with that 24 words that they found, and they're going to have your Bitcoin now. So with this, the idea is to have 0 trace of Bitcoin in your house and to make it impossible, even if somebody broke into your house, that they could do anything with it. That's kind of the main sell for it.
That makes a lot of sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. So, okay, so then how does this tie into like inheritance planning? Because some of the ideas, like one of the inheritance ideas, again, with seed phrase, passphrase, is you could actually give your seed phrase to, say, a lawyer, or write it into your will, have no Bitcoin on the seed phrase, then have passphrases that you give to your heirs. And once they receive that information from the executor of the state or the attorney, they can just add in their passphrase to the seed phrase. That's one really, really simple maybe a little bit vulnerable way of passing on Bitcoin. But how does Superbacked kind of change that? What's the inheritance type protocol for that?
It's the same kind of process as that. There's probably some people out there who are maybe not as familiar with the vulnerability that leaving your 12 or 24 words with somebody else has, because if somebody else has that information, they basically own your Bitcoin. If they can sign that transaction and move your Bitcoin, they own it. So there are probably some people who just leave their 12 words with their lawyer and just fully trust them, right? And that's fine. A lot of people have trust with their lawyers. It's not fine. It's fine maybe at $100,000 Bitcoin, but like people go rogue. It could be the lawyer, it could be their admin clerk, it could be anybody. Once Bitcoin gets to where we think it's going to be worth, there's going to be a lot of different things playing out here. So it's very similar to the process there that you talked about, Forrest, where you can leave this inheritance document with your lawyer without compromising any sort of actual information that's useful to them. But the nice thing about the inheritance thing here is that we have a very clean, fresh document, very organized in terms of your devices, the QR codes, the location of those, who to contact, all these different things built into this, which is just another feature, I guess, and part of it. And I think that inheritance itself is a big problem for a lot of Bitcoiners. So just having a document there that isn't compromising any information, that's very detailed, very structured and organized, that you can leave with a trusted person like a lawyer, that you can pass on to your family so they're not going on a treasure hunt. So to summarize there, it's very similar to the process, but it's all kind of done for you and built into the package here.
Nice.
So you were saying that there's a device that prints out a QR code. How do you print that out? Because I don't know if it would be how would that work? Would that be offline?
No, that's a good question, because most people are probably thinking, well, Jor, you've told us 1,000 times, never put your private key on anything on the internet, which is true. And so basically what we do with our service is we take like a laptop, it could be an older laptop, whatever you have. You essentially take the hard drive out of it. That's there's a couple different options, a couple ways to do it, but like the super paranoid way to do it is to rip out the hard drive from the computer. You run a secure USB. It's called like an Ubuntu, I believe. That's what runs the software off of. And that USB, it actually doesn't write any information. It's set to just read only. So it's not leaving any information on the USB. It's not leaving any information on the laptop. And while you're going through this, you're obviously disconnected from the internet. So the device itself, the laptop itself, basically serves as a secondary air-gapped hardware wallet. I would argue more secure, because you're the person who went through the whole process. You're not trusting Coldcard or Foundation or whoever, but it's the same kind of the process there. So it's fully air-gapped, not connected to the internet, and it should never touch the internet here if you do it properly.
So you're just running Linux and Superbacked off of a USB drive on a computer with just a motherboard, basically, CPU and RAM.
Exactly.
Interesting. And you can do it all offline. So you've downloaded and flashed it all onto a USB, and then you're plugging it into a device that's never online.
Correct.
Interesting.
And would you just print it out like using a regular printer?
Yeah, so we usually tell people to get like, again, it all depends on your level of trust, your level of paranoia. We usually tell people to use like a wired printer, not like a Bluetooth one that would, you could send that signal. Again, you're just making copies of an encrypted QR code here. So even if something did happen during the printing and the transfer there's not a whole lot that you could do with that. But still, the more paranoid, you'd lean towards like a wired printer that isn't connected to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything like that. And that's kind of how you go through the process there.
How long would this take to set up? Like if somebody already has their wallet set up, if somebody already has everything already there, would you have to create a new wallet? Would you just use the same wallet that you had from before?
No, we basically just start with where people are. Part of the service that we do a lifetime membership. And so part of the service is we meet with people once or twice a year, just to make it, we call it a security health check, just so it's kind of top of mind. If there's any other questions you have, if you want to upgrade from like a single sig to a multi-sig, we can help you with that too. But essentially when we start the process, it's where you are today. So if you have a Coldcard single sig, we just kind of find a way to make that much better, much more secure, with the QR codes geographically dispersed, and then also have an inheritance plan built into that. So essentially wherever you are today, we can just make that better, plus plug in the inheritance plan into that.
And so throughout this entire process, does anybody else have to know how much Bitcoin you have? Does anybody else have access to your wallets? Do they have access to your addresses?
Great question. And I think that this is what really sets this solution apart from other ones. So similar services, you think of like a collaborative custody, like Unchained, Casa, Nunchuck. They're great and they're a little bit more convenient, but there's trade-offs with everything, right? So with this service, it's fully non-KYC. So we don't even have to know your last name. We don't know your street address, your phone number, your verification, your ID, anything like that. We basically just walk you through it, the whole process here, to make you as sovereign as possible through it. So it's fully non-KYC. We don't hold a key to it. We don't know how much Bitcoin you have. And so there's no trust involved. It's all on you. We just kind of talk you through it and support you through the whole process there. So that's the nice thing about it is you can also pay in Bitcoin. So there's no name attached to anything there. So you can go fully non-KYC doing this service here.
And this might be just a very nuanced question. I know people. So there was a guy who came on one of my podcasts and he wore a mask the whole time because he wanted to stay anonymous. If somebody does do a call with you, would they be able to stay anonymous? Like, would they be able to give you a fake name, fake email, all that stuff, and then just use that for that contact? Because of course, you're going to know they have Bitcoin, and they don't want anybody to know at all, right? So could they do that? Could they stay completely anonymous as well?
Was that the bank robber meme?
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think about this solution as like the cypherpunk version of it, right? So my business partner, he's actually in Sweden. He's a privacy and security expert. I think that he's probably the top 100 minds within Bitcoin in the world. Might be 1,000, I don't know, but he's a very, very intelligent guy. He was actually an early funder of Superbacked. So he himself doesn't really show his face in the meetings and stuff. He's very privacy focused himself. Obviously, I'm on YouTube. I'm a little bit more public. So that's my role here. But yes, absolutely. If somebody wanted to not share their name, not share their face, we could still go through the whole process without them compromising that information.
Pretty cool. I mean, I think that answers all my questions. It definitely seems to solve issue. I think it solves an issue that people don't think about right away. I think that's maybe like why it hasn't fully caught on to like such an extreme thing. But it's like people think, Bitcoin is secure, your keys are secure, and it's true. Like you've generated 12, 24 words. That's basically next to impossible to brute force. It's very secure that way. But then beyond that, people don't think, okay, well, what happens if somebody finds this? It's like you kind of got to go down a couple layers of added security measures until you get to something like this. But to me, this encryption definitely does solve that need of self-securing your Bitcoin. So I don't know. It's a really cool service.
Yeah. And it just, even with when people get to the point of realizing that they need to take this into cold stores, they need to generate their keys offline. The next logical step for a lot of people is putting it onto steel, right? Because it's better than paper. No, there's no doubt about that. And so if anybody's watching this today, don't like freak out and panic and stuff. Like this should be your end goal, but you can take steps in between, like a passphrase, as Forrest mentioned. A steel plate is a good play. But the problem with the steel plate that I found, other than it being in plain text, and if somebody came with a metal detector at your house, if somebody broke into your house, it's in plain text. So they put those 12 or 24 words into a new device. They now own your Bitcoin. So that's a very big vulnerability there. But the other one too, that a lot of people don't think of is like, will it actually survive a fire? Like steel, maybe. Titanium, probably. But if you think about like the wildfires in LA, like your house is on fire, your whole block's on fire. You might not be able to come back to your site for like a week or 2 weeks or a month. And how many people are going to walk past that steel, assuming it's, still readable, between then and there? So yes, it's a little bit better, but it's not like the perfect solution for protecting your Bitcoin. And we're talking about an asset here that we believe is going to be around for the next 1,000 years. And so it is important to take these steps early on, because if something happens, it's almost impossible to get back to where you were. So having things like this in place, I think, is critical for Bitcoiners all levels right now.
I just have one last question before we go. I think you did a pretty. You give us a pretty great overview of this thing. What would you say are the downsides to this? We know there's always trade-offs. We know there's never a perfect solution. What are the downsides of somebody getting super backed?
I think the biggest downside is just that it's more work, right?
More
Like
work.
that's how I start every conversation with people is like, this is going to be uncomfortable a little bit for you. It's going to be more work, but it's the best way to secure your Bitcoin that I've found. So it's hard. And that's the trade-offs there. I talked about something like Unchained. It's very easy. You give them a call, they walk you through it. They charge you $2,000 for the setting it all up. It's easy to do. But again, you're trading off your KYC information there. You're letting them know what your Bitcoin balance is. Even if they're just storing one key for you and they can't do anything with the Bitcoin, that information is a vulnerability, I think. If the administration's changed, depending on who's, in charge of your country right now, these things could matter if somebody else knows how much Bitcoin you have. So it's a little bit more work. It's not impossible though. Like the people we've helped so far are not experts in technology and technical stuff and like Linux users. It's like that's the point of what we do here is we walk you through step by step, basically holding your hand through the process, tell you what you need, help you through it. But it's a little bit more work. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to do this, asking the questions. None of this was rehearsed, as you could probably tell watching this video. But the last thing that I would mention, because this is a common question that we get, which is what happens if you guys, what happens if your company goes bankrupt, or what happens if Superbacked goes out of business, something like that. And so the cool thing about this is it's a file, it's a piece of software, right? So it's available on GitHub, it's verifiable. So that's a nice, obviously, feature that you can verify the code. So you can download it from GitHub. We teach you how to keep your own archive copy of it. So you have your original one, you have a backup of that. We keep backups. You can use something like Internet Archives to also download it later if you needed to. Plus, there's actually going to be banks, lawyers, notaries who are going to be using this software in the next couple of years. So worst case, you could always go down to a bank or a lawyer and say, please restore this Bitcoin for me. So we want to train people to be as sovereign as possible and make sure that they're, they know what they're doing with or without us. But as a lifetime membership, you kind of have us for once or twice a year for the rest of your life to make sure that everything's kind of in order here.
So it's a free and open source project then. And then what you guys are offering is the service of onboarding and helping people use the service, because it's not entirely intuitive, probably.
Exactly.
As many software isn't.
Right.
Very cool.
It's actually pretty user friendly to use. The main benefit and the value add that we have here is telling you which pieces of equipment you need. So we give you recommendations for laptop, printer, laminator, webcam, all this kind of stuff, and then going through the process of actually making sure that it is fully air gapped. So you could do this yourself. You could actually go to superback.com. You could download the software. You could just check it out, see how it looks. And then if you're interested, you could have us help you through the private way to do it so that it's not ever exposed to the internet or any devices into the future there.
Cool. Awesome.
So that's it. Usually I tell you to support the channel here with the QR code beside Rajat's head, but we just appreciate you listening to this. So this is a service that we have. I think hopefully Rajat and Forrest will be going through it themselves, a little bit more detail. We wanted to make this video because, the less you guys knew, the better, I think, for the overall conversation here. But anyways, if you're interested, I'll leave something in the pinned comments where you can get a hold of me and we can set up a conversation, see if it makes sense for you. But I do appreciate you guys taking the time today, asking the questions, and that's it. Thanks, fellas. We'll talk to you on the next one.
Oh, Rajat, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say before we end it off, I think this is really valuable because people do want to ask these questions, and maybe somebody watching this video, they book a meeting with you and they ask even deeper questions, and you just have more and more. They have more knowledge. You have more knowledge. You have better ways to look at things. So more information is always a good thing, and that's one of the things about Bitcoin. We want to make sure that everything is transparent.
Yes.
I like Jor. I think Jor is a good guy. I trust him. I think his goal here is to actually advance people's wealth. I bought Bitcoin partly because of him. I know there are other people who bought Bitcoin because of Jor as well. So this is something that I think you should look into. I think this is something valuable. You don't have to trust him. He's a good guy. Trust me, he's a real person, but you don't have to trust him. You can actually book a meeting with him and see what he has to say. I feel like that would be a great step.
Well, thanks, Rajat. You made my day with that comment. I didn't know that before now. But yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. You don't need to trust me. That's the nice thing about the whole solution is that it's fully trustless. You can verify the code, or there's been a lot of smart Bitcoiners. The whole software is actually developed by the original hardware wallet developer of Trezor. That's who was part of the development of Superbacked, and a guy named Sun Knudsen from Canada, actually. So some privacy experts, some security experts in there, and it is nice that you can verify this stuff yourself without having to rely on anybody, never mind just me or Rajat or Forrest or anybody. So thank you for the kind words there, Rajat. And we'll end it now. Thanks, fellas.